It started like any other Tuesday afternoon at the West Republic Bank on Sunset Boulevard. Polished marble floors, the soft hum of classical music, and a line of customers checking their balances or asking about mortgage rates. But at exactly 2:41 p.m., something happened that would turn this quiet California branch into a national headline within the hour. She walked in wearing a tailored cream blazer, dark navy slacks, and a confidence that didn't need to speak. Her name was Dr. Camille Jordan, 42 years old, CEO of a private equity firm that oversaw more than $600 million in assets. Her posture was poised, her walk steady, athletic even. Not flashy, not loud, just undeniable. And yet, within 90 seconds of entering the lobby, she was stopped. "Excuse me, miss," came the voice from behind the premium client desk. "The welfare office is 2 blocks down. This isn't a walk-in branch." The man's name was Mark Reynolds, branch manager for 15 years. He stepped in front of her, arms folded, lips curled in polite suspicion. Camille paused. Not in shock. In calculation. The room went silent. Customers shifted awkwardly. One teenage girl started recording on her phone. Camille didn't flinch. She opened her purse, pulled out a slim black wallet, and spoke calmly. "I'm here to inquire about my firm's investment accounts." Mark scoffed, loud enough for others to hear. "Your firm? Ma'am, this section is for our premium clients, those with actual portfolios." That's when it started. The live stream. The whispers. The tension. Camille didn't raise her voice. She didn't protest. She simply looked at her watch. 2:42 p.m. And when Mark pulled out his phone and said, "I'm calling 911. You're causing a disruption," he had no idea he was about to make the worst mistake of his career. Because in less than 4 minutes, the woman he tried to remove would fire him. With one phone call. And 1.8 million people would watch it happen in real time. You ready? Because this is the story of what happens when power underestimates presence, and prejudice meets its match. Mark Reynolds didn't look up from his computer right away. He simply caught the motion of Camille stepping through the door, glanced up, and made a snap decision before she spoke a single word. She didn't belong here. Not in this part of the bank. His eyes moved from her dark skin, to her natural curls tied back neatly, to the understated gold bracelet on her wrist. There was nothing loud or flamboyant about her appearance. But to Mark, something didn't sit right. And that something had nothing to do with bank policy. He stepped forward with the casual confidence of someone who'd done this before. Dismissed, redirected, denied. "Ma'am," he said, in that overly polite tone used when someone's presence is more tolerated than welcomed, "this section is for premium clients. If you're here to cash a check or open a savings account, you'll need to join the general line." Camille turned toward him, maintaining her calm. "I have an appointment," she said. Mark didn't blink. "With who?" His tone had already decided she didn't. "I was told the Sunset branch handled high net worth portfolios," Camille replied. Mark smirked. "Oh, we do. For clients we know." He let the sentence hang. A few heads turned. The man in the gray blazer near the teller counter tilted his head. A woman holding her toddler raised an eyebrow. Camille said nothing. She simply reached into her briefcase and produced a platinum American Express card. She held it lightly between 2 fingers, not flaunting it, just presenting it. Mark barely looked. "Those can be faked, you know. You can buy 'em online," he said. Camille didn't flinch. A younger employee behind the loan desk, Lisa Romero, watched quietly. She'd heard this tone before. Not always from Mark. Sometimes from customers. But this time, the discomfort in her gut was sharper. He wasn't just being rude. He was being something else. "Sir," Camille said, with measured control, "I'm here about an institutional investment relationship that involves 7 figures. Do you always treat new clients this way?" Mark snorted. "Not new clients. People who just walk in? Duh. I make sure they're not wasting our time." Camille's jaw tightened. Not in anger, more like restraint. A beat passed. 2. The phone in the teenager's hand was still recording. Then Camille said, "Time is something I don't like wasting either." She pulled her phone from her purse. Tapped once. Sent a message. Mark laughed, assuming it was a bluff. A way to save face. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't imagine, was that the person on the other end of that message was his boss's boss's boss. And she wasn't going to like what happened next. The silence in the lobby thickened. Even the gentle background music had faded into irrelevance, like the bank itself was holding its breath. Camille stood still, her phone now back in her bag. Her fingers rested on the leather handle of her briefcase. Nothing about her posture was aggressive. If anything, it was composed, calculated. But the tension had already been cast. From the far side of the lobby, a voice broke through. "Young man," said Mrs. Dorothy Lee, her southern accent clear and full of age-earned authority. She stood near the teller counter, a petite woman in her late 70s, holding a checkbook and cane. "I've been banking here since before you were born. I've never seen someone treated like that for simply walking in." Mark glanced at her and forced a half-smile. "Mrs. Lee, with all due respect, this is a private conversation." Dorothy narrowed her eyes. "You made it public the second you started raising your voice in front of half the city." Jayla, the teenage girl holding her phone, tilted her device slightly, capturing both Camille and Mrs. Lee in the frame. Her live stream was now over 1,300 viewers and rising fast. Comments flew in by the second. "That woman's a legend. Protect Mrs. Lee at all costs. Y'all, this is going viral." Behind the teller counter, Lisa Romero stepped out from her station. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice didn't. "Mark," she said cautiously, "maybe we should verify her appointment before escalating things." Mark turned sharply. "Lisa, I've got this. Go back to your desk." But Lisa didn't move. Camille finally spoke again, this time her voice directed to the room more than to Mark. "I appreciate those who recognize this isn't just about me. It's about how systems behave when they think no one's watching." The words hung in the air like a spotlight. Mrs. Lee nodded slowly. "Well, honey, they're watching now." And she pointed, not to Camille, not to Mark, but to the glowing red light on Jayla's phone. Live. Recording. Broadcasting. Witnesses weren't just standing in the room. They were multiplying by the minute. And across hundreds of screens, thousands of strangers were already choosing a side. Mark Reynolds was sweating now, but not from fear. From pride. He was convinced he was doing the right thing. That he was protecting the institution. So when he pulled out his phone and dialed 911, he did it in full view of the lobby. Like it was his badge of honor. 911, what's your emergency?" the dispatcher asked. Mark spoke slowly, clearly, like he was reading from a script he'd rehearsed in his head. "Yes, this is Mark Reynolds, branch manager at the West Republic Bank, Sunset location. We have a disruptive individual refusing to leave the premises. She's causing a disturbance and intimidating customers." Camille didn't even flinch. Her arms remained at her sides. Her voice never rose. Her feet hadn't moved an inch. But she had suddenly become a threat. To Mark. To his fragile perception of control. Lisa gasped softly from behind the counter. Mrs. Lee shook her head in disbelief. "And Jayla?" she whispered into her phone. "Y'all, he just called the cops. On a customer. Who didn't raise her voice once." The comments exploded. "Oh no, he didn't. Calling 911 on a black CEO? Tag the NAACP. Tag the press. Tag everybody." Camille looked up, her tone even and deliberate. "Sir," she said, addressing Mark calmly, "are you certain you want to escalate this to law enforcement?" Mark didn't respond to her. He was too focused on his performance. "Yes, she's wearing a white blazer and navy pants. African American. Mid-40s. Possibly dangerous." The last two words settled over the lobby like poison. Dangerous. Camille slowly turned toward security guard Franklin Dawes, a former Marine with 18 years of service. He hadn't moved an inch, but his jaw was clenched. "She hasn't moved," he muttered under his breath. "She hasn't done anything." Mark ended the call and tucked his phone back into his jacket pocket like he'd just saved the bank from a robbery. "Police will be here in a few minutes," he said smugly. "Maybe they can help you understand our policies better." Camille exhaled slowly. Her gaze didn't show fear. It showed patience. The kind of patience that comes from knowing exactly who you are, and exactly what's about to happen. Because the moment that call ended, so did Mark Reynolds' career. As Mark stood there, Practically basking in his own authority, Camille pulled out her phone, not in panic, but with precision. One tap. Then, another. She wasn't calling for help. She was summoning accountability. Mark watched her from the corner of his eye and chuckled. "You can call whoever you want," he said, smug. "But when the police get here, they'll handle this properly." Camille looked up briefly, not at Mark, but at Franklin Dawes, the security guard, then back to her phone. "Jason," she said softly into the receiver. "It's Camille." Slight delay. "I'll explain in 5 minutes." She hung up. Mark raised an eyebrow. "Jason? Friend of yours?" Camille didn't answer. Instead, she placed her phone back in her purse and folded her hands calmly in front of her. Mark scoffed again. "That's what I thought." Jayla, still live streaming from across the lobby, whispered into her phone. "Something's coming. I can feel it." Viewers in the comments agreed. "She's too calm. He messed up bad. Just wait. She's about to flip the script." Behind the teller line, Lisa Romero opened the internal email system and scanned the latest updates from corporate. A new message had just landed. Subject line, "Executive Visit, Confidential." She clicked it out of curiosity and froze. There, in bold letters, Dr. Camille Jordan, Equity Partner, Board Member, West Republic Holdings. Sunset Branch Visit, Tuesday 2:30 p.m. Lisa's eyes darted from the screen to Camille, then to Mark. Her breath caught in her throat. He had no idea. The woman he just reported to the police wasn't just any client. She was his boss's boss's boss. Lisa took a shaky step back, unsure whether to intervene or simply stay silent and survive the storm. Mrs. Lee noticed Lisa's pale expression and whispered, "You all right, honey?" Lisa nodded, barely. But Camille stood still, poised like royalty in a courtroom she didn't request but now commanded. The lobby no longer belonged to Mark. It was hers. Only he hadn't realized it yet. And when he did, it wouldn't just be a bad day at work. It would be the day everything changed. At exactly 2:51 p.m., the air conditioning kicked on. It was a small mechanical sound, barely noticeable over the murmur of voices and the rising tension. But in that moment, it felt like a clock starting. A countdown. Lisa Romero still stood frozen behind the teller desk, her eyes darting between her screen and Camille, between the corporate email and the woman standing in front of it all. Poised, calm, and waiting. She wasn't here for service. She was the service. Mark, meanwhile, leaned casually against the customer service counter, still under the illusion that he was in control. Still unaware he was standing in a house made of paper, holding a lit match. "Still here?" he asked Camille with a smirk. "If you don't leave now, this is going on your record." Camille raised one eyebrow slightly. "Whose record, exactly?" she asked, voice even, tone layered. Mark scoffed. "Ours. West Republic. We log all incidents." At that moment, Lisa's phone buzzed. Another internal email. "Urgent flag. All staff. Attention Sunset Branch Team. Dr. Camille Jordan's visit is now active. Ensure proper protocol and full transparency. Executive oversight in progress." Lisa's lips parted slightly. Oh God. She looked toward Mark, who was now pacing a bit, pretending to be unbothered. Jayla's livestream ticked past 1,800 viewers. Mrs. Lee leaned her cane against the counter and stepped forward with that same slow, quiet strength of elders who've seen everything and fear nothing. "Mark," she said, voice low. "You might want to stop talking." "Why?" he snapped, frustrated now. "She doesn't even have an appointment." From behind the glass office wall, the assistant branch manager, James Liu, stepped out holding a printed document in his hand. He glanced down, then looked directly at Camille. "Dr. Jordan," he said clearly. "Welcome. We've been expecting you." Silence. Mark blinked. "Doctor." James handed Camille the document, a briefing packet with a West Republic Holdings seal and Camille's name at the top, listed as Equity Partner, Board Member, Regulatory Liaison. Mark's jaw dropped. Camille took the packet gently, looked at James, and nodded once. "Thank you," she said, like nothing about this day had surprised her. Because it hadn't. But for Mark, it was the beginning of a long, brutal realization. He hadn't just disrespected a customer. He had just called 911 on a corporate owner. Mark's face was pale now. No more smirks, no more smug interruptions. Just silence. You could see it hit him, like a car crash in slow motion. The name. The title. The weight behind every word James Liu had just spoken. Dr. Camille Jordan. Board member. It echoed in his head like a bell tolling at the end of a very long, very arrogant career. Camille didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She didn't need to. She simply reached into her purse, pulled out her phone again, and tapped once. "Jason," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "It's me. Proceed." No theatrics. No raised voice. But those words, proceed, were not ordinary words. They were activation codes. Mark blinked, stepping back instinctively, as if he could somehow undo the last 15 minutes. "What does that mean?" he stammered. Camille didn't answer him. Instead, she turned toward Franklin, the security guard. "Mr. Dawes, could you please restrict Mark Reynolds' access to customer data and branch systems immediately?" Franklin hesitated for just a second, but he'd been in enough high-stakes situations during his military years to know command when he heard it. "Yes, ma'am." He walked over to the control panel behind the teller line and entered a few codes. Mark's screen locked out. His badge access was revoked. The bank had turned on him, and it hadn't even taken a full sentence. Camille raised her phone once more. Another call. This time to HR. "Yes, this is Dr. Jordan. Please initiate a personnel poll on employee ID 33278. Full history, performance reviews, customer complaints, and manager assessments." Mark's ID number. How did she know that? She wasn't just someone with a fancy title. She knew the system. Knew where to strike and how hard. Jayla's livestream was now over 2,400 viewers. The chat exploded. She knew his ID number from memory. "You mess with the queen, you get dethroned." This is better than any Netflix drama. Camille turned to Mark one final time. "You asked if this would go on my record," she said, softly. "But now, the only record anyone's looking at is yours." Mark didn't speak. What could he possibly say? The call had been made. The system was moving. And there was no pause button left to press. By 2:58 p.m., West Republic Bank's Sunset branch wasn't just a financial institution. It was a live broadcast. Jayla's livestream had crossed 3,000 viewers. Screenshots of Mark's face mid-9/11 call were already circulating on Twitter and Reddit. Someone on TikTok had clipped the moment Camille said, "Proceed," and set it to dramatic music. The internet was doing what it does best, turning moments into movements. And Mark Reynolds had become the face of a problem bigger than just one man. On the other side of the country, at West Republic's national headquarters in Charlotte, North Carolina, a senior communications manager glanced at her screen and dropped her coffee. Trending. #banking while black. Top post, CEO walks into her own bank. Gets 911 called on her. Then fires the manager. Live. Back at the Sunset branch, Camille's phone buzzed. She glanced down briefly. Text from the communications director. Crisis protocol initiated. PR holding statement drafted. Legals on standby. Franklin Dawes, the security guard, turned toward Camille. "Ma'am, you're all over Twitter." Camille didn't even blink. Let it trend. Lisa Romero, still behind the teller line, watched the chaos unfolding. She had worked here 6 years. Never had she seen leadership move this fast. But Camille wasn't leading from reaction. She was leading from purpose. Across the lobby, Mrs. Lee, still calm, still observant, leaned on her cane and shook her head. "I've seen storms," she said, almost to herself. But this one came with lightning and justice all in the same strike. Mark stood off to the side now, stunned into silence. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he didn't dare check it. He already knew what it was. Emails. Texts. Panic. People asking, "What did you do?" Camille finally addressed the room. "I want every customer here to know something," she said clearly. "This isn't about revenge. This is about accountability. Because if we can't trust the people managing our money to treat all clients equally, they have no business managing anything at all." Jayla whispered to her phone. She just dropped the mic, y'all. Another 1,000 viewers joined the stream. Corporate lawyers were now watching. So were journalists. So were future board members. Camille Jordan hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't thrown a fit. She had simply told the truth, and let the system feel the heat of its own reflection. And now the whole country was watching. Camille didn't wait for permission to act. She didn't need it. She tapped her phone once and connected directly with her executive assistant. "Michelle," she said calmly, "start pulling the complaint history for this branch. I want records for the last 3 fiscal years, customer grievances, internal HR reports, unresolved service issues." There was a brief pause. Then Camille added, "Flag anything involving discriminatory language or escalation involving law enforcement." Mark's eyes widened. He shifted uncomfortably where he stood, suddenly aware that Camille wasn't just reacting to his mistake, she was building a case. From behind the glass office wall, Assistant Manager James Liu re-emerged. He held a manila folder that had been sitting untouched in a filing cabinet for months. He opened it slowly and scanned the pages. He looked up at Camille. "There've been complaints," he said, voice low but firm. "About Mark. Some formal. Others swept aside." Camille nodded. "How many?" James flipped through the file. 9 formal complaints in the past 22 months. 5 involved customers of color. 3 included direct mentions of Mark using inappropriate tone or questioning client legitimacy. He swallowed hard. 2 involved calls to security. 1 ended in a police visit. All were closed without follow-up. Camille's jaw set. Who closed them? James didn't speak, but his eyes glanced toward the regional manager's name, Terry Dalton, printed in black ink at the bottom of each dismissal form. "Noted," Camille said. Lisa, the teller, stepped forward. Her voice was cautious, but sincere. "I've seen things," she said. "Mark always acted different around black clients. Made comments after they left. He'd say things like, 'They probably can't afford a checking account anyway.'" Camille looked at her. "You ever report it?" Lisa nodded. "To HR. Last year. But nothing happened." Jayla, still live streaming from the corner, whispered into her mic, "We're at nearly 5,000 viewers. And it just got real." Mark opened his mouth, but no words came. Camille turned to Franklin, the guard. "I want every door code reset. I want Mark's badge fully deactivated. I want access logs reviewed for the last 30 days. "Yes, ma'am," Franklin said without hesitation. This wasn't discipline. This was a full-blown internal investigation. Camille Jordan wasn't just cleaning house. She was lifting the carpet and finding everything that had been swept under it for far too long. By the time the LAPD patrol car pulled into the lot, the story had already passed 5,400 viewers online and was being mentioned on 2 local news station feeds. But no one was in handcuffs. Because the woman Mark tried to remove didn't get arrested. She got results. Officer Ramirez and Officer Daniels stepped through the doors, calm but alert. They were expecting a disruption. Instead, they saw a composed black woman in a white blazer standing beside a man whose hands were shaking at his sides. Camille turned to greet them. "Officers, thank you for responding so quickly," she said with a polite nod. "There's no disturbance. No threat. But I believe you've been misinformed. I'm the equity partner and board member of this bank." Mark tried to interject. "I didn't know." Camille raised her hand. "You knew what you assumed. And you acted on that." The officers glanced at one another, then at Franklin, the security guard. "She's telling the truth," Franklin confirmed. "Everything's been documented." The officers nodded, de-escalating instantly. Camille looked directly at Mark. "For 15 years, you've managed this branch like a private gatekeeper. Today, you made a decision based not on fact, but on bias. You crossed a line that can't be undone." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a termination letter, already signed, time-stamped, and sealed. "Mark Reynolds," she said clearly. "As of this moment, your employment with West Republic Bank is officially terminated, effective immediately, for gross misconduct, violation of federal anti-discrimination laws, and breach of ethical conduct." The entire lobby froze. No one moved. Even the officers looked stunned. Mark's mouth opened, but there was nothing left to say. His face was pale. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 20 minutes. "You can leave now," Camille added. Security will escort you out. Franklin stepped forward gently but firmly. Let's go, Mark. Jayla's livestream caught every second. Viewers spammed the comments. This is justice. Fired. Live. He messed with the wrong one. As Mark walked out, shoulders slumped, steps heavy, Mrs. Lee whispered just loud enough for the camera to catch. That's what accountability looks like. Camille didn't smile. She didn't gloat. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about sending a message to everyone watching. Prejudice has a price. And today, it was paid in full. The door closed behind Mark Reynolds with a soft click. It wasn't just the end of a career. It was the start of something bigger. Camille turned back to the lobby. The air had shifted. Tension had dissolved, replaced by something heavier, reflection. This isn't just about one manager, she said, addressing everyone in the room. Bias doesn't grow in isolation. It grows in environments that allow it to breathe. James Liu, the assistant manager, stepped forward, his voice steady now. We've had concerns before, he admitted. But without support, people were afraid to speak. Complaints got buried. HR was slow. Camille nodded. Slow, she repeated, is how discrimination survives. Not by shouting in the open, but by being ignored in the quiet. Lisa, the teller, added, there are policies that sound neutral, but they're not. The ID checks, the verification tone, the way certain customers get extra questions. It's all subtle. Until it's not. Camille turned to her phone again. Michelle, connect me with compliance and legal, she said. I want every customer policy reviewed for disparate impact. Start with account verification protocols and frontline procedures. She paused. And while you're at it, send me a list of unresolved complaints at all branches in our top 10 markets. This wasn't just a house cleaning. It was a structural audit. A systemic reset. Jayla's stream was still live. The chat had shifted. Less rage, more respect. Near Foop. She's not just firing bad apples. She's rebuilding the whole orchard. This is how you lead real change. Camille looked back to the staff. We're launching a full-scale internal audit of employee conduct, management oversight, and customer experience metrics by demographics. And starting this quarter, every branch's investment potential will factor in cultural competency. She paused. Not optional. Not negotiable. James whispered, that'll shake the entire system. That's the point, Camille replied. Systems that aren't shaken never change. She turned to Lisa and James. I'm promoting both of you, temporarily. You lead the reform rollout here. Full transparency. Staff surveys. Community town halls. Lisa looked stunned. Me. You spoke when it mattered, Camille said. That's leadership. Outside, cameras from Channel 7 were being set up. Inside, the work had just begun. Because Camille Jordan wasn't interested in headlines. She was building a new standard. And it started by tearing out the rot, root and all. By 3:15 p.m., Camille Jordan had done more than fire a man. She'd issued a wake-up call to an industry. The press conference happened right there in the branch, spontaneous, unplanned, but fully necessary. With news crews set up outside, Camille stepped out onto the sidewalk where dozens had gathered. Employees, customers, even strangers who had watched the live stream now stood shoulder to shoulder, curious, captivated. A journalist raised her hand. Dr. Jordan, what do you hope comes from today's events? Camille didn't hesitate. I hope, she said, we stop pretending discrimination is rare. I hope we stop letting, I didn't know be an excuse for professional negligence. And I hope every company watching this moment realizes that silence is a decision. The microphones captured every word. So did 1,000 smartphones. Camille continued, her voice firm, but never aggressive. We don't fix systemic injustice with press releases. We fix it with policies. With consequences. With leaders who understand that diversity isn't decoration, it's direction. Jayla, still holding her phone, whispered, she's preaching, y'all. This is church. One by one, customers approached Camille, quietly, respectfully, to shake her hand. An older black man in a plaid vest leaned in. My daughter wants to be in finance. I tell her she'll have to work twice as hard just to be seen. Today, I can tell her, people like you exist. Camille smiled, a rare softness showing. That's why I'm here, she said. Inside the bank, Lisa and James began organizing printed materials for a town hall meeting scheduled the next week. A whiteboard had already been set up in the lobby titled, "What should change first?" and sticky notes were starting to appear. Treat every customer like they matter. Hire more people who look like the community. Make this branch safe for everyone. Camille stepped back inside. She looked at the staff. This wasn't a publicity stunt, she said. This was a warning shot. If we want to be a trusted institution, we have to deserve that trust. She pointed at the customer feedback kiosk. Real change starts with real accountability. Every comment, every rating, counts. Then she looked directly into the camera that was still streaming. If you've ever been profiled, dismissed, or silenced, know this, your story matters. And if no one in power is listening, it's time we put better people in power. The crowd applauded. Not because they were impressed, but because they believed her. 3 weeks later, the West Republic Sunset branch looked almost unrecognizable. The marble floors were the same. The logo on the glass door hadn't changed. But the atmosphere, that was different. Customers walked in with shoulders relaxed. No more tension in the air. No more side eyes at the front desk. The feedback kiosk inside the lobby now displayed an average rating of 4.9 out of 5, with thousands of comments from customers of every background. Employees who once whispered about inequality were now speaking up, leading trainings, mentoring newer staff. The whiteboard labeled, "What should change first?" had grown into a full community wall. Dozens of handwritten notes taped across it like promises, all starting with the words, "Never again." And Camille Jordan? She didn't stop after Mark's firing. She kept going. She met with national banking regulators to discuss standardized anti-bias compliance policies. She published an open letter in the Wall Street Journal titled, "When they judge the skin, they miss the mind." And she launched a non-profit initiative, Bias Interrupters, to help train frontline staff in banks, hospitals, schools, and government offices on how to recognize and challenge everyday discrimination in real time. One act of disrespect had sparked a wildfire of accountability. But not because Camille shouted. Not because she threatened. Because she stood still. Firm. Measured. Unshakable. And that's the lesson here. In a world that constantly tells people, especially black women, that they need to be louder, smaller, nicer, or invisible just to be tolerated, Camille showed what happens when you refuse to shrink. When you let the facts speak. When you let the system expose itself by holding up a mirror. Respect, as it turns out, isn't given. It's demanded, not with rage, but with resolve. So if you've ever walked into a room and felt unseen, unwanted, or judged before you said a single word, remember this story. Remember Camille Jordan. She didn't just walk into a bank. She walked into her own branch and reminded everyone exactly who she was. Not with volume, but with vision. Not with fire, but with fact. Because power isn't about how loud you get when you're disrespected. It's about how clearly you move when you know you're right. Let that be the story you carry forward. Let that be the standard you set. And if no one else tells you this today, you belong in the room.